Welcome to your go-to Detroit Pistons podcast, The Pistons Pulse, co-hosted by me, Bryce Simon of Motor City Hoops, a former D1 hooper and current teacher, husband, and father of 3 amazing kids.
And I'm Omari Sanko for the second Pistons beat writer for the Detroit Free Press.
And as you may have guessed, based on that intro, we are not joined by our producer, Wes Davenport, today. He is out of town, and the internet was not quite good enough in his Marriott hotel to help us out. But of course, make sure you're listening to Wes and Blake Silverman on the Pin Down over on the Detroit Bad Boys YouTube channel. Make sure you're reading Omari and all of his work, including following him on social media platforms. And the Motor City Hoops Substack is completely free for all of you as well. Derek Brown says, can't wait for this one. Let's go. Thank you for joining us, Derek. I know our times have been a little off. Listen, we're both headed for Summer League on Wednesday. I have my kids' baseball game tonight. We originally were going to have Jason Timpf on to join us. He'll join us after Summer League sometime to talk about the offseason. We had the Chaz Lanier press conference today, which we'll talk about shortly. So just a lot of moving parts right now. And so we just have to find the time to record when we can. The one thing I will say, Omari and I will both be out at Summer League, me for a much shorter time than him, thank goodness. But if you see us walking around, that's the great part of Summer League is we're all just intermixed there. So make sure you say what's up, say hello, talk Pistons with us for a little bit. We always really, really enjoy that, O2.
Yeah, and you're like 6'6", so I feel like you stand out a lot more.
You're it's either me or I think it's the Houston Rockets assistant coach. Yeah. Like it's me or him because we're about the same height, bald with a similar beard. So you got a 50-50 chance. And if it's not me, then you got somebody better to talk to because it's an NBA coach.
If you had glasses, like that would be the Walter White. Like it's a very classic look.
Yes. Luckily, I'm the only one in my family who doesn't have to wear glasses. Real quick, O2, before we get into
perfect 2020.
I do, yeah. I've been blessed with very good vision.
Man, look at you.
Ranny, yeah, my wife wears glasses, and then our 2 older kids started wearing glasses at 8 years old. I mean, it was identified early in their education that they could not see at all.
Yeah, I started wearing glasses, I would say in like 3rd grade, so I was probably like 9 or 10. Both my parents wear glasses. Like both my siblings wear glasses. Like almost everybody, probably on my mom's side, but I would have to. That's actually wild. Congrats, man. That's big.
Yeah. No, it's like the one really good genetic trait. I assume this is genetics that got passed down to me. Not the one. My parents passed down a lot. It's the one that I have that really stands out compared to the rest of my kids. And unfortunately, I did not pass that down to them. Sports Time ask O2, is there a full video of Trajan's presser today?
Not of Trajan's presser, I don't believe. I know that Chaz Lanier is going to be uploaded, but I would check the team accounts. There are some news stations there too, so I'm sure you can probably piece it together on YouTube in some capacity, but I don't have a full video of it.
Okay, so let's get into that because we're going to talk full off season. We have some little more details and specifics of over the cap, under the cap. How was Dennis Schroeder left Detroit? How did Karis LeVert come to Detroit? What is still available for Detroit to use? We have some of that stuff figured out, but we did have Chaz Lanier's intro press conference today. And then it sounds like you got to ask Trajan Langdon some questions as well. Let's start with Chaz. What was the thing that stood out the most as you guys got a chance to ask him questions? The 2nd round pick that will be playing for the Pistons in Summer League on Friday.
Yeah, I would say just the maturity. He stepped in and talked about his experience, first 4 years at North Florida, and then he made the mid-major to SEC leap and put together a really great season for Tennessee. So, he just talked about his readiness. He said, pretty much verbatim that he felt like he can make an impact for this team day one. And I mean, you look at his game and it's just all based around shooting the ball and, coming off screens, like, skills that translate for a lot of guys, not for all shooters, but for a lot of shooters pretty immediately. So that's what came through to me is just the maturity and like, he's not the guy that's coming in as like a project. You know exactly what he could do. And maybe there could be a chance for him early, depending on how well he's shooting it.
Yeah. I mean, he's an interesting player, O2, in regards to he did play 4 years at North Florida. I used to give Dalton Connect this little bit of leeway as an older prospect because of his path to Tennessee and then ultimately the NBA. And it's not something I brought up with Chaz Lanier. He only spent 1 year at Tennessee, which is known for their defense, but it's still just 1 year. Now, I don't know North Florida well enough to know how much they emphasize defense and what the coaching was like and all of that. I'm sure it was great. But in terms of high level Division I basketball on a night in, night out basis, he only got 1 year of that. So in regards to an older prospect who spent multiple years in college basketball, there may be some more room for growth in regards to that end of the floor. I don't know that we're going to see a whole lot, maybe athletically or the offensive skill. I think his, calling card is obviously going to be the shooting, but I know he mentioned in his presser today that the defensive end of the floor was where he was kind of putting his focus, which it's still something, it's at least good to hear him say it, right? Because a lot of times people will say, well, that's what they're supposed to say. That's what they all say. It's not what they all say. Like, go back and, follow Ace Bailey's process through the pre-draft. And it wasn't always what was said. So it was good to hear him say those things. And I do wonder if it's something he can continue to grow and improve because of his path.
And Trajan on draft night talked about the upside that he could have on defense as well. He just mentioned Rick Barnes' physical style, and obviously he's in a really physical, really athletic conference in the SEC, and just that rough and tumble style, he said, should mesh pretty well with the Pistons and what JB Bickerstaff wants to do. And he's not a small wing either. Like, he's 6'4", but he's got like a 6'7", 6'8" wingspan. Like, he's got solid weight. Like, he's not really a small guy. So you would hope at least, he could probably defend a mix of 1 and 2s, maybe some smaller 3s. Obviously he's got to have quickness and anticipation, and there's a lot more to it than just having size. But like, with all of that combined, like, you hope that maybe he could at least grade out to be a net neutral. And we have seen guys come in with, reputations that weren't great on defense and them figure it out in the league just purely off hustle and smarts, which they believe that he can do.
I remember looking this up. I mean, I hate to do this because it's like, oh, this is really easy because he was just on the Pistons, now former Piston Tim Hardaway Jr. with the Nuggets. But his game did remind me of Tim Hardaway Jr. in a lot of ways in terms of how quick he gets his jumper off, really kind of being a 2-level scorer in terms of the 3-point shooting, but then having like a mid-range pull-up potential. But the other thing was he had right about the same standing reach as Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't know what the weight numbers are, but in terms like, he's not 6'2", right? Like, he's not super small, and he had almost a 40-inch max vertical jump. So this is a guy with a little bit of athleticism, a little bit of size, like, to your point, that can have some versatility in terms of the matchups he takes and what he does on the defensive end. Anything else that stood out from Lanier's portion of today that we need to get to before moving on to Trajan? Because we will talk Summer League roster a little bit later in the episode. So we'll round this back to Chaz Lanier, to Bobby Klintman, Dennis Jenkins, et cetera, et cetera. But anything else before we get into what Trajan spoke on today?
No, I would just say it was just different. One, only having one rookie to talk to, given that they've had multiple guys pretty much every year prior, I think every year prior, at least since I've been on the beat.
Cade's year was just him, but it still was number 1 pick, and you had 2nd round pick at least, right?
Yeah, so, I was trying to think if Isaiah Livers was in that class, though.
Yeah, no, that's what. Yeah, I think Livers was like what, 37 or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, but he might have been 22. I forget which year he came out in, but he would have.
I got it here. They traded 37. They took Livers at 42, but it was Livers and Garza. So, I mean, you had Holland last year, I guess, was the only one as well. But
last year.
Klintman came in. Asar was with Sasser, Ivy and Duran, obviously. The first year there was multiple. So this was probably the first year where there weren't at least a couple when you add in the 2nd round picks, right?
Yeah, so it was just more of a low-key affair compared, not in a bad way, but just in the sense that with it not only just being one guy, but one guy who comes in, probably closer to being a finished project where it's not so much like, like what can you become? Like with Ron, it's all about, youth and potential. And with Chaz, it's more so, you come in as a shooter, right? So you're questioning him, almost more like you would a free agent maybe, you're not questioning him like he's a rookie. So it was just a different energy, really. I was kind of talking to people in the media room, but like this whole offseason is just so much more of a low-key affair compared to the past few when you just consider the lack of what they've had to do coming off of a stable season. So today just kind of extended that same feel.
Yeah, how disrespectful of me to forget our guy, Balsa Koprivica. I actually ran into him on the Strip in Vegas. I think it was the second year I went, and we were eating at the same place, and I was too scared to say what's up. And then a little bit later, I was walking around, and him and I think there was a couple other players walked by as well. So I want to get to the Trajan part of the presser, Omari. Where do you want to start with that? I know there was a few different things. There was the Asar size thing. There was the people are forgetting Jaden Ivey's returning thing. I think a lot of our questions are coming about the 4 position, which that would, as YouTube user says, that gets us that would give us a chance to geek out about cap stuff. Where do you want to start? You were there in person, obviously.
Yeah, we could start like just where it opened with, the elephant in the room, which was Malik Beasley, obviously, and having to pivot at the last minute. And Trajan acknowledged that they had not much time to pivot just with the timing. The news came out the day before they were allowed to talk to outside free agents. So you kind of go from, Malik Beasley's going to tie up our MLE, and then you just make some other moves on the margins to, now we have to find somebody else to fill the MLE with. And now we also have to replace, to an extent, the shooting that she got with Beasley. And this also, if you replace Beasley with a different type of player, do you take Schroeder? Or does he become redundant? And there's this whole chain of events that essentially went from we can run it back to, them replacing all 3 vets with 2 guys, and then they resigned Paul Reed, obviously. But I think the not much time aspect of it, and, him just talking about how they pivoted. And then you end up, with 2 wings who feel, a lot of what they lost. And he talked about Karras, being able to handle the ball. Obviously, Duncan Robinson can really shoot. And he talked about his ability to come off screens and get downhill a little bit too. So, I think from that view, when you look at just how fast they had to pivot, I think it's just important, to keep in mind, especially when people kind of talk about, well, they should have made a bigger swing or this and that. They very much wanted to still kind of maintain their flexibility and rely on youth. And they tried to thread the needle on that. And, it seems like to an extent they were able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to live in an alternate universe where this stuff with Beasley didn't happen, right? Like, obviously for him, the person, I wish this wasn't happening to him, whatever. But what was the plan, right? Because just because they were going to bring Malik Beasley back, would Tim Hardaway Jr. still be in Denver? Would Dennis Schroeder still be gone? Like, what was the plan overall? Or was it bring Malik Beasley back, and then was it to go in a different direction? You know what I mean? And so with the rest of the roster. So I do kind of wonder sometimes what plan A was. I know Trajan referenced having to pivot very quick, but I feel like plan B had to already have been discussed, right? You know what I mean? I think this is interesting insight into what front offices have to do in terms of, okay, this is option 1, 2, 3, 4. If this guy goes here, this is what happens. I'm not saying they predicted that Beasley, this would be the situation, but they had to be what if somebody overpays for him? What if somebody trades for, whatever? My guess is they had these plans in place, but I'm sure it wasn't this exact scenario. They just probably had guys identified that they felt like could replace what they were going to end up losing.
Yeah. And, that's a good point too, is that front offices prepare for, plethora, that's the word of the day, plethora of scenarios. And like you said, Trajan even acknowledged it early on, we don't know for a fact that we could keep those guys, and then in that, regard, you have to have a plan B or whatever it may be. So, it's not like they suddenly had to, go on Basketball Ref and look up the Karras LeVert stats and figure things out at the last minute. They already had things in place. It's just when you felt like your plan A was pretty certain the day before and then it gets blown up, obviously that forces you to pretty much scrap plan A entirely. So no, that probably wasn't the first time they talked about trading for Duncan Robinson or seeing if they could get a, TPE for certain guys, which they got for Schroeder. And again, when you talk about where they ended up, they still ended up checking a lot of the same boxes of what they had, just divided across different players.
Okay, so let's get into some of the other things. So Cade Season says, according to Trajan's responses today, Do you know if he will go after a backup 4? It seems like we won't go after a backup 1 yet. I assume that is from the comments around Jay Ivey being able to handle the ball, Karis LeVert being able to handle the ball. Did you get any kind of insight into, well, did he feel like the roster is whole already, or are there some quote unquote holes on the roster that still need to be filled?
Yeah, he acknowledged that the roster's at 13 and they have 2 roster spots open, but he said they're not in a rush to fill the 14th. And I think the question was phrased like, would you feel comfortable with this roster going into the season? And, he said, yeah. And he mentioned like Jaden Ivey coming back, being able to replace a lot of the ball handling that you lose with Schroeder. And like at some point, like, yeah, maybe you do fill that spot. But I think for now, they feel like they've got the core of the roster in place. And, like if you do anything else, it'll be more of a move on the margins, I would imagine. I'm also, and this is just me talking, I also just wonder with Bobby Clinton, like, he's a guy that could fill into that spot pretty well. Like he's looked good in limited minutes. I wonder if that could be something that leads to an opportunity for him.
Yeah, we will talk about Bobby again whenever we get to the full kind of summer league roster and all of that. Another thing that came out today was the, comment about Asar Thompson. So Piston Sicko says, O2, have you seen Bobby, Ron, or Asar in person recently? Do they look noticeably larger at all? I mean, I know this is something that's always kind of joked about in the offseason, but I remember like seeing Cade Cunningham or different guys at Summer League or in workouts, and you're like, if nothing else, they do look bigger and more physical. So I know that Asar was part of the quotes today. Can you kind of give the listeners, in case they haven't seen or heard that, what Trajan said on Asar, and then maybe answer this question as well?
Yeah, he said Asar just looks like he's filled out frame-wise. Shoulder is broader. He just kind of phrased it as, obviously, as you get older, especially in your early 20s, you naturally just got to fill out a bit. And he's been in the gym. He said he's working on ball handling. Obviously, he's working on shooting, finishing at the rim, essentially everything. He talked about just how much he's been in the gym. Also talked about Ron. He said Ron has been in the gym relentlessly. So, excited for him. I have not seen those guys in person. I figure I'll be able to catch them out in Vegas. The team will have a practice out there at some point. Me and Bryce will both be out there. By the way, for those who are unaware, both get there tomorrow. And I don't know when you take off, Bryce, but I think I'm taking off Sunday. But, I'll be there for a few days.
Oh, you're only there till Sunday?
Yeah, I'm only there till Sunday. Yeah, I'm only doing the first 4 days, 4 or 5 days.
I feel like usually you guys end up having to stay out there longer than that. So
yeah, I mean, there's just no reason to I doubt Ron plays more than one game, and so many people clear out after that first weekend anyway. That it's just, I think right after COVID, the first summer league I went to as a Pistons reporter was 2021, and I did all 10 days, and beyond it just being too long to accomplish what you need to do, because you can do it in 4 or 5 days. It's also just too long to be in Vegas. So,
facts.
So I was just like, I can't do more than 4 days. So that's my limit for now.
Okay. Before we go to break, is there anything else from the presser? Because when we come back, I do want to talk, there's a lot of questions about the cap situation. Guys, Keith Smith is literally texting me as we're recording right now about some of those situations, what's available and what's not. Can always count on Keith to give us some stuff. Obviously, Kyle Metz is Piston specific version of that as well. He has great stuff also. Anything else from the presser? Because when we come back, I want to talk about the Schroeder sign and trade, what that means, how they sign LeVert, what's available, et cetera, et cetera. I know there was a comment on J.I. Anything else that I may have missed here before we go?
No, just that, the overall focus is still on the development of the young players. Trajan said this all summer. I feel like there was a brief spell where people got excited about something big happening. And it's just, he's been pretty transparent the whole time that was not in the cards. But, he just said, do we get better next season? He doesn't know. It just depends on how the young players improve. And that just kind of goes against some of the, belief. And I'm not saying that there's, a right or wrong belief one way or the other, but sort of the belief that there's this window that the Pistons have to capitalize on now with the East being wide open. And, I don't think the Pistons see it that way. I think they see this as a long-term deal. They're not just going to cash in their chips just to be competitive for 1 year. They want to build a team that can sustainably compete against, teams like the Phillies-Jeff Celtics or teams like OKC. That's, they've got, depth all the way down to the 12th or 13th man. So that's an overall focus, still about the young guys. He reiterated that, and that's pretty much it.
Mr. Ray says, darn, I'm late with the popcorn. That's all right. We appreciate you being here. We still got a lot to go here. Also, the popcorn actually triggered something for me. Remind me at the end, O2, we need to talk about Jurassic World, because I went and saw the new Jurassic World movie, and I do have some thoughts. So we need to talk about that as we go. Real quick from Derek Brown. You guys are the best. Like, I feel bad when you do super chats and you guys don't make us answer a question or something. So Derek Brown, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, enjoy a cheap lunch on me tomorrow when you're at Summer League. Derek, you let O2 off he owes me right now. You can't let him off the books with this.
It just subsidizes a little bit. Derek, we appreciate it, man.
We are going to go to a more expensive lunch on Friday. You know what this will do? This will pay for Laz's lunch on Friday. This is what this will do, since Laz so kindly joins us every few weeks or so, and the three of us get to have lunch on Friday. I've never met Laz in person, so I'm super excited.
That's actually really funny. Like,
It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, like, especially now that we're 5 years for me into this, the amount of people you know who else I've never met in person? Keith Smith. I've never met Keith Smith in person as well. So there's all of these people.
I'm surprised you and Keith have not crossed paths at Summer League.
I mean, so I think last year or something, I met Trevor. I was like, hey, is Keith here? Like, this is Summer League though. You know this. You make all of these plans to see all of these people, and then you just get caught up, and it gets crazy. So
yeah, you can only be, like, the hardest thing about Summer League is that you can only be in one place at one time.
Yes.
And there's always a lot of things happening. So you kind of, I definitely get that.
Yeah, you can't have 7 meals a day and go watch the games in both gyms all at the same time. So Derek, thank you so much. It will be put to great use, I promise. We're going to get into the mechanisms of what has gone on, the Pistons' current cap situation, right after this.
All right, we're back with segment 2. We're going to talk about the cap. I think it's safe to say by now, and I think Keith also, confirmed this on Twitter earlier, that they operated it as an above the cap team, which kind of makes their offseason slot in like a puzzle, basically. Karis LeVert took that non-taxpayer mid-level that initially would have went to Beasley. Paul Reed probably fits into the biannual, right, around $5 million or so.
So Keith just texted me about that.
But that's still the TBD.
Yeah, so Keith just texted me and said, Reed, based off his free agent rights, the Pistons will still have their biannual exception available. So there would be a little bit of room. Like, I think that's the main way for them to add. That would be the only way for them to add a free agent now that they've worked over the cap.
And that would make sense because you have his bird rights, and if that can cover the contract, then obviously you would preserve the biannual. So if they do go after that 14th player, then that's probably the market. I mean, not probably, that is the market. Like, it would be somebody in that range.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and so what year? So that's a little over 5 million, I believe, is what it is this year. So, I mean, I think some of the names people are talking about, which we'll get to, that is realistic, like, for those names at this point. So, like, I'm interested with that O2 that they were able, because when they stayed over the cap, now you kept Paul Reed's, what would they have, non-bird rights or whatever it was. So I think, and the way I still haven't fully grasped it, but the way Keith has explained it, I know Kyle has said maybe they kept full bird rights and it wasn't non-bird rights, but whatever it was, they were able to sign him without using a biannual or anything like that.
And the uncertainty is just because they waived him and then claimed him off waivers and re-signed him. So I guess the question is, when you get waived and be signed by the same team, does that clear the bird rights, or do they transfer automatically? Which I think I mentioned the other week. There's always some granular cap stuff every year that comes up that I haven't really had to cover before. And that's one of the things this year that's like,
bro, Keith tweeted this the other day. Keith Smith tweeted the other day that there's ones this offseason that he didn't, he has to get into the minutia of.
Yeah, it's like, I feel like the NBA cap is I imagine it's got to be like learning English if it's not your first language. Like, things just are, and you just accept them, and that's just basically how it goes.
Here's what I want to shout out. We're 27 minutes in. We've used the word plethora, minutia. We're going to talk Jurassic World at the end. We're a pretty boring podcast when it comes down to it, O2. I don't mean to speak for you. I know I am, but we give you a lot of variety and versatility here on episode 175 or whatever we are. Also, how about this? From Robert Lydier. What up, though? Thanks for your show, and shout out to Robin Chan. Let's go.
Shout out to Robin. Yeah.
Robin getting a shout out in the comments today. Yeah, Mr. Ray says the NBA cap is a monstrosity. There we go. Here's the thing. The NFL cap is in contracts are a little confusing as well. I don't understand any of it other than going to Over the Cap or Spotrac and then looking at it. You know what I mean? Like,
the NFL cap is like, I feel like they could just do whatever they want.
That's right. That is exactly right.
They can just do whatever they want.
There's you can never, here's the thing. You think you couldn't judge the Duncan Robinson contract when it first came out because there was some partial and non-guarantees? Like, wait for an NFL contract to drop. Patrick Mahomes signed $500 million, and I have no understanding of when he gets the money, how he gets the money. You know what his cap hit is this year, Omari? $28 million somehow on a 10-year, $500 million contract. Next year, it's supposed to be 78, and somehow they'll write a check and bring it down. Like the NFL cap, I listened to one podcast and they love to crush the NBA stuff, especially the draft night hat thing. And I'm like, stop trying to be like the NFL doesn't have confusing things as well.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, the NBA cap doesn't always make sense, but at least it's consistent. And I feel like the NFL, I just think they make stuff up. Like, I literally just think they make stuff up. And I don't even see, I don't see NFL capologists trying to break stuff down the same way that people in the NBA do. I think people just accept that you can just make things up. If anybody wants to counter that, feel free. But that's the one aspect of the NFL where if I had to cover it, I wouldn't even want to touch that. I would just be like, they just did it because they could. And that just seems to be how it works to me.
No, I think it has a lot to do with how much cash your owner is willing to spend, because all I hear is the Eagles have these dead years or something like this at the end of contracts, and it's because their owner's willing to write off more cap. I don't know. It's crazy. So over the cap team, let's get into the mechanisms. Duncan Robinson is probably the easiest, right? Straight sign and trade for Simone Fontecchio. I think lost in all of this. So Simone Fontecchio no longer on the Pistons. Duncan Robinson in. We finally got numbers on the contract. Correct me if I'm wrong. Fully guaranteed, $2 million guarantee, non-guaranteed for the 3 years. That all right, Omari?
Yeah. Full guarantee year 1, partial guarantee year 2, non-guaranteed year 3. So basically, if they waive him next summer, he'll get a certain percentage of what he signed for in year 2, so he'll get a certain amount of that $16 million. But then the Pistons are off the hook. That's basically just dead money on the cap, and then he's off the books after that season. Or if you
not Damian Lillard dead money for everybody,
no.
or Bradley Beal dead money for everybody. Very minimal dead money.
Very minimal. And if he's on the team for 2 years, he's essentially an expiring contract at that deadline. And there's a lot of flexibility with the deal, but it's essentially a 1 year commitment, 1.5 year if you want to count the dead cap as a penalty for next season. But again, you talk about the optionality and, them stepping in, trying to find a replacement for Malik Beasley to, you get a shooter of Duncan Robinson's caliber, 3-year deal because it's a sign and trade and it has to be at least 3 years. But for that to not be a full commitment, and I think I compared that to an NFL deal last week, just in the sense that it's $48 million, but it's not $48 million. It's really, whenever they decide to part ways. So
it is very much an NFL, as much as we are crushing the NFL, it's very much an NFL deal. This is how NFL deals are structured. You get paid a little bit up front, and then eventually the last 2 years are a little bit fake. All right. I'm sorry. I'm not even going to try this. Matt something. What up, though, from Switzerland? Love your work. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I promise you it's better for me not to try to say your full name than it is for me to try and say it and do a very bad job. I really apologize. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the comment. If you can sound it out for us in the comments, I'll say it correctly. But thank you so much. Okay, so sign and trade brings Duncan Robinson. Let's go to Karis LeVert, because this is the question now was, okay, over the cap, YouTube user says, did we sign him with the MLE or did we end up using cap space, over, under, why, etc.? Karis LeVert has now come out. It was the non-tax MLE, which means with all of this stuff, they operated as an over-the-cap team. He comes in and he uses that, $14.1 million non-tax MLE in 25-26, gets a 2-year deal on that as well, Omari.
Yeah, just the non-taxpayer MLE. So that's just a pretty, standard contract. A handful of guys around the league essentially got the same rate, or around that, divided across however many years. And, it's a pretty good contract, flexible contract. and you get a guy, and this is what Trajan talked about earlier, who checks a lot of boxes as a ball handler, like 6'6", can defend a little bit. So just like it's a flexible contract, just in a different way from Duncan Robinson. But, Karras is also a guy, that could be here for the full 2 years or longer, depending on how that mesh is. So
okay, so then the next move, we talked about the Paul Reed thing. Again, it's a little bit confusing, but essentially they were able to retain him using his rights in some capacity. The other move then was, Tim Hardaway Jr. leaves to Denver on a vet min. I think a great addition for Denver. I actually really like what Denver's doing, especially if they can keep Valanciunas here. Like, we'll see how that plays out. The Dennis Schroeder to the Kings thing, too. This was the big holdup. This was, are they getting Malik Monk? Are they going to get somebody else? Are they going to? So this trade essentially, this ends up being a sign and trade that essentially is Detroit sending out a real second round pick in 2029. Is that right? Or is it sooner?
It's 29, and it's the worst of their pick.
The worst of 3 picks or something?
Yeah, they have 3 picks, and it's just the worst of the 3 picks. So probably ends up being in the 40s or later.
Send a real second round. I want to be fair on both sides of this because I've seen some contention, about what happened here. And Sacramento, because you have to send something back in a trade. This is a trade, and both teams have to give and get something. Sacramento was essentially a fake 2026 second round pick that's not going to convey unless the Charlotte Hornets have just the turnaround of all turnaunts. So Dennis Schroeder to Sacramento.
And even if they did, it would be the 57th pick.
Yeah, exactly. So, correct. Yeah. Even if they did, it would be 56 to 60. Real quick, Will Smith, Timp is not joining us. The way the schedules went and worked and all of that, we just weren't able to connect. He was locked in. He was awesome. He's great. We were very apologetic. He promised me he would join after Summer League, after things died down, but we did not get Timp today. We were really excited about that. Just weren't able to make it happen. So what were your thoughts on this? Because I know a lot of Pistons fans are we're giving up a second round pick to send out Dennis Schroeder. But the other aspect of it did create a $14.3 million trade exception, I think is what the number is. And so those are kind of the outlines of what happened there with Schroeder to the Kings.
Yeah. And they wanted that trade exception. I mean, obviously the way the trade was structured, they sacrificed, pick that's probably not going to be significant in the long run, but they gave up something of value to get the TPE. And for those who are curious about it, it's essentially just you could think of it as a cap space buffer that you can absorb salary into the TPE, and you essentially don't need cap space for that. So you could think of it as it's almost like its own little cap space bubble.
Yeah.
You could just absorb something into it, and it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. And you can read between the lines a little bit. They have 2 roster spots open, and they have the biannual exception that has not been used. And then they also have that TPE that has not been used. So, when Trajan talks about, I think optionality and stuff, they have a year to use that TPE, and I think they will use it in some capacity. Otherwise, they would have gone through VAFs to try to get it the way that they did.
Michael says, question, when you guys get to segment 3, can you put into plain English how TPE is practically used? Seems like we are treating it as fan like MLE. So the big difference here is it expires after 12 months, I believe. So they have to use it by whenever this trade went official. If it was yesterday, the 7th, or today, the 8th, whenever it was official, you have 12 months to use it. And it is not used, they can't hold it to next offseason and use it to sign a player. You can't use it to sign a free agent. The non-tax MLE can actually be used as both mechanisms. That just changed in the new CBA. It used to only be used to sign free agents. You couldn't use it as a trade exception. Now you can. The Pistons have used theirs on Karis LeVert, so now they have this trade exception. For example, I believe the Hawks used a trade exception they had to bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker in that deal. So that is one, you can do it to quote unquote sign a free agent, but then you just turn it into a sign and trade, right? So I don't know what PJ Washington's making right now. I think it's right around this number.
It's right around 14. Yeah.
So if they wanted to trade for PJ Washington today, they could trade for PJ Washington. They could bring him in because they don't have caps, and they wouldn't have to send out anything to Dallas. If Dallas was like, no, we don't want any money back. We just want, 3 second-round picks or whatever it is for PJ Washington, whatever. They could do that. And then Dallas would create a potential trade exception. So that's
like
how it works.
It's like a voucher. Like I was thinking coupon. I'm like, it's not like a coupon. It's like a voucher. This voucher is worth $14.3 million.
Yep.
You can look up salaries and see what fits into it, and that's what it's worth. And it expires in a year. It's just that's essentially what it is.
Yeah, go to Spotrac and just click, you can go to all contracts, you can filter them by average annual value, and you can go see all of the players making 14.3 or less, and then just go see the players that could potentially fit into this. Now, it is important, if it happened next offseason, you can't combine it with cap space, stuff like that. But anyway, it is, Mr. Ray. It is literally passing the exception around. The thing is, most of them, I shouldn't say most, a lot of them will just expire. So I think that was some of the conversation, and fairly was, okay, well, if he doesn't use it, you just ended up using a second round pick for nothing. And that's fair. It is probably a pretty bad second round pick to get the optionality for a sizable trade exception in this scenario. Dennis Schroeder, right? That's a guy they acquired last year. It wasn't this same way, but the same idea. They had cap space in that scenario. But this is an interesting trade exception that they have to go get people where you don't need cap space. And again, they could go to next offseason, and if they don't have cap space, O2, because they re-signed J.I. and J.D. or whatever, next offseason, they would have this to do something, and they only have a couple days to do it, but they could figure it out. So that is why we went down this road, and it took a week to finalize this thing. Is I assume there was some negotiation, because I don't think Sacramento had to do sign and trade to bring in Schroeder. At a certain point, that's why they got a second round pick, right? Because they didn't have to do sign and trade. I think they could have just brought him in, I believe.
Yeah. So the Pistons had to give something of note to make it happen. And I think they also absorbed him into a TPE that they had for Kevin Huerter, right?
Okay, yeah, that's probably right. Yeah, so
that's an example right there, because whatever Huerter was making, Huerter signed for reportedly $15 million, so it just fits right there.
Yeah, so Roger Fisher says Trajan can use the TPE to help facilitate a bigger trade for other teams in exchange for picks, right? Absolutely. Here's the thing: if it's 14.3, that's just a touch bigger than a non-tax MLE. Now, there's probably not very many guys that fit in that range, but he would have a decent, I think it's one of the bigger numbered trade exceptions out there right now. So yes, Roger, it doesn't have to be to improve the roster. Maybe he gets a few second round picks back because he absorbs a contract to facilitate another move. So again, optionality, O2, optionality. And I did not know this coming into the recording till Keith texted me. They have the biannual exception that we talked about earlier, where they can still add to that roster. So 2 very specific mechanisms to fill out the final 2 roster spots if they so choose. Hopefully that outlines the the trade exception for everybody and kind of how those work. And I know that's, from Australia, Joel from Australia. Love it. I love it, man. All over the world where we get people in here. It's really, really cool. So, all right, let's go to break. And then O2, I want to talk about the Summer League roster. And then we have a bunch of questions we have to get to before we get out of here as well. So let's do the Summer League stuff first, and then we'll round back to all the questions and knock those out. We'll get into Summer League right after this.
All right, we are back with segment 3, and let's talk about Summer League. Obviously you have Ron Holland. I'll be curious to see if he plays more than a single game, but he will be there, and I do think he'll play and get some experience as the quote-unquote vet on this team in year 2. You have Bobby Klintman and Chaz Lanier, obviously. You've got some of the guys from last season, Dennis Jenkins, Lou Smith. You have TJ Bickerstaff, who is JB's nephew.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. I know we had this question here from Douglas Taylor. How's TJ Bickerstaff related? So
yeah, you've got some guys like you.
What's the relation? That's a nephew? Is that what you said?
It's his nephew. They've got some guys too. If you follow college basketball, there's always going to be some guys on these lists that got to pop out. Like Bryce Williams was one for me. Was there anybody else on there that kind of stood out to you?
That's what I was going to ask you. What was the name? I mean, obviously Lanier is huge. Bryce Williams is a guy, I'll tell you, Sam Vecini, who I do the Game Theory podcast with, really liked Bryce Williams. Thought he was a draftable player. So really interesting name from me. You know what else I thought was awesome? They brought in Zakai Ziegler for Summer League. Anybody want to guess where Zakai Ziegler played his college basketball? Point guard at the University of Tennessee. So who better to get Chaz Lanier his shots than Zakai? I mean, the answer to me is Bobby Klintman. And you know, I'm not going to overreact to Summer League. I tweeted out the other day. I called out ESPN last night for like calling Topich the next coming of whatever. But listen, it is fun to talk about Summer League and evaluate and analyze what happens. Ultimately, Bobby is the one I'm most interested in. And to see what he looks like.
Yeah, like we've seen so little of Bobby, but like what we've seen, it just seems like he pops, you know.
Yep, sure.
You notice him, but he's always doing productive stuff. Like his passing. I think he only played one game last year. It was that last game in Milwaukee, and he was probably like the best player in the second half when they mounted that comeback.
I got a full video breakdown on the Substack if you want to remember. So,
and I was like, that's the only thing I remember. Well, a few guys went off of that game, but like I most vividly remember Bobby Klintman having like 10 points and like 6 assists in like 25 minutes or something, and it was like, okay, he keeps doing this. So, yeah, I'm curious to see like how he looks in year 2. You know, he's had a full off season of NBA development under his belt. And like I said, this is a team that clearly has some need at the 4. And, you know, I think he has a chance to be a classic NBA 4, classic modern 4, just based on what we've seen so far.
So Steve T asked early on, who is more likely to be a legit rotation piece? Let's just go for 25-26-02, kind of independent of Summer League, obviously. You think Chaz Lanier more likely to get some rotation minutes next season or Bobby Klintman?
I would say Klintman just because I think the opportunity is a little bit more clear just with trading Simone Fontecchio. Like him and Tobias were like the really natural 4s on this team. Like I think you could play a Sar there. I think you could play Ron there. I think to some extent, like the concept of a 4 kind of probably doesn't matter if you just get like long rangey athletes out there at every position. Maybe you just don't worry about that aspect of it too much, especially if one of Ron or a Sar could knock down some threes and you can play them together. But beyond that, like Bobby Klintman probably is the only other guy on the roster who could at least kind of fill in and give you some of what Simone Fontecchio did for you last season. And I think I think he's solid defensively. I think he rebounds. I do think he is a good shooter. He didn't shoot it very well last season. So if you could get, you know, around 35-36% shooting out of Bobby Klintman, maybe there's something there. You know, so I just think opportunity-wise, there's probably going to be a more immediate need for what Bobby brings compared to Chaz, where obviously you've got some guys in that backcourt.
Yeah, Cloudy says Bobby moves the ball really well, smart, fast passing. I agree. Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest things I like highlighted in that breakdown. We get a hello from Bosnia Pistons as well. Again, worldwide now. I absolutely love it. Any other thoughts on the Summer League roster, players? Dawson Garcia from Minnesota is a player that I've kind of, you know, just a name that I've known throughout the last few years of college basketball. I'll tell you this. I like Dennis Jenkins. I think he's a good player. I think he's a perfect player to run your G League team at the very least. Obviously, Chaz Lanier is a huge name. That's probably it. Oh, Vitaly Potapinko is the head coach. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Very cool. That's a name from back in my day when I was a young kid. So
nice. There's another. Oh yeah, like I'm familiar with him. So he's a long-time JB assistant. He was with him down in Memphis for a bit as well, and yeah, obviously had like a decade-long NBA career. Sincere Carey is a name that stuck out to me just because, for those who don't know, before the Free Press, I worked for The Athletic. And before The Athletic, I worked for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And Sincere Carey was a pretty big get for Duquesne University while I was at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So I just remember him being recruited by Keith Dambrot, and they ended up having some really good years under Dambrot while he was there. So it's just funny how guys kind of pop up randomly over time. I never covered Sincere, but I just remember seeing his name and, you know, obviously following Duquesne to an extent down there. You know, I think he's got a nice game, so it'll be curious to see what he can do.
Okay, let's get to the fun portion of the podcast. We'll answer questions. If sports time, if you're still in here, I actually text Wes your question, so I'll have his response. But I want to start here. Roger Goodell. Oh, shoot. He probably left since we were trashing on the NFL.
Roger, you explain the salary cap first, and then we'll answer your question. Now, go ahead.
What's the best performance you guys ever saw live at Summer League? Do you have one that stands out to you?
Yeah, I remember Jabari Smith looking like Kevin Durant a year or two ago.
And he was telling the Pistons about it too.
Yeah.
Cade and all the dudes were lined up right there courtside, and he was like, he can't guard me. Yeah, he was getting after it. That's right.
Yeah, that's probably the main one, honestly. Like, a lot of those performances don't really stand out. Like I remember individual games, like individual moments. But yeah, that's like, I thought he was going to come out this season just like destroying everybody based on that.
Yeah, I will tell you this. Jordan Miller put up a crazy performance late night last year in the back gym that was pretty impressive. I will also tell you, like, Jay Huff was the player that last summer, like, just kept catching my attention every time I walked in a gym. So I've said this before. This is probably why we won't record while we're out there. I struggle to watch the games. Like, you're always talking to somebody or you're walking here or whatever. Like, I just don't get a chance to watch. Last year or 2 years ago, we went to record after a Pistons game and I was like, oh, you got to carry the actual game because I literally didn't watch any of it. Like, I have no idea what I'm going to say when we record. So there is just a lot going on in regards to that. So Sports Time says, which West was here. I need to know why he's pushing the power forward Asar agenda. Asar can play the 4 for sure, but he isn't a 4. He's a 3-2. West said he plays offense like a 4 who can handle the ball. Easiest way to fit him into lineups. Let him be a 4 and play near the hoop. Then have him roam wherever on defense. So I'm
in agreement with Wes on this.
So I will give the one pushback with my issue with Asar at the 4. Unless you have some other big time perimeter defender, I don't love that it can hamper the versatility of the matchups he can take, if that makes sense, right? Because depending on who else he's on the court with, if he has to guard Julius Randle because nobody else has the size to do it, then he can't guard Anthony Edwards. You know what I mean? So that's my only qualm with the Asar at the 4 is just like the matchup versatility that he can have, because if you're starting what would that look like? KJI LeVert, right? Asar has to guard Julius Randle in that lineup. Now it's like, okay, LeVert, go guard Anthony Edwards, but I kind of want Asar to guard Anthony Edwards. So that is my only hiccup sometimes with Asar at the 4.
Yeah, and you're giving up some size for sure. And I think defensively, I mean, Asar could handle a lot of different matchups, but he's, I think, especially adept at, opposing primary ball handlers. And that's probably the most important role you could have as a defender other than protecting the rim. So, like, that's understandable for sure. Like, I think you play him at the 4, but defensively, he probably is going to match up more so with 2s and 3s and some 1s as well.
And I cherry pick there, right? Like, I use like, even the Indiana Pacers, though. Like, okay, who's going to guard Pascal if you're going to put Asar on Halliburton? And, I mean, sorry, Tyrese, hopefully you're healing well. But, okay, Roger Goodell, if you had to guess, what position would our 14th man be? I think we still need a stretch big. I think he's just asking, like, what would you add to the roster, O2?
Yeah, probably a little bit more insurance at the 4, ideally, just because I don't think you could survive many injuries at all there, without having to play some guys out of position, and they haven't been playing Stu at the 4 at all, so that's not probably an option. So yeah, I think backup 4 is probably the main priority, followed by maybe still getting some sort of veteran point guard back there.
Yeah, YouTube user says Chris Boucher, Trey Lyles are kind of what I would like to see if they're willing to accept a reduced role. I agree 100%. Like, this would be what I would try to attack right now, is a guy like that with the biannual exception. And listen, I'm a little more okay with the ball handling situation with J.I. coming back, with Karis LeVert on the roster, with Asar taking a little bit more. But I'm cool. Like, if you want to add a Monte Morris, or, let's run it back 4 years ago and bring Corey Joseph back into the mold as well. But in that role as a true third point guard that's only playing based on injury, or you just really need the team settled down. I had somebody pitch an interesting name of Kyle Anderson to me if he became available, because he kind of can do a little bit of both, because he can initiate your offense. But I think I'm with people know I want to stretch big. Boucher does that a little bit. Like, you could play those guys at the 5, right, in small ball lineup. So maybe they do a little bit of both. Speaking of guards, Ben says, has the window closed on Marcus Sasser becoming a Lindsey Hunter type role player, i.e. key backup on a contending team? What do some of the moves this offseason say for Sasser whenever you bring in a Karis LeVert, a Duncan Robinson, J.I. is coming back? When you look at that to what the rotation was at the end of last season when Sasser wasn't in the rotation, and then you lose those 3 guys but replace him with 3 new guys, including Jaden Ivey, it still doesn't seem like he's probably in the rotation, Omari, especially when you add in Chaz Lanier.
Yeah, it's tough to see where those opportunities would come from. And I thought Chaz played pretty well in the minutes he did get last season. Shot like he had a really hard rookie wall kind of midway through his rookie year. But last season, I mean, he shot the ball really well, took care of the ball pretty well. I think the issues are just one, like he's a bit small for a guard. He's probably more of an off guard. So I think it kind of limits what you can do matchup wise, especially defensively. But the reality for this team is just like they have Cade and Jaden Ivey, and those guys are young. You're going to want vets around them. And that just kind of leaves Chaz in, a tough spot where, he probably can't get as many developmental reps to show what he could do. Like, I like his game. Like, I think he's an NBA player. I think he could figure it out and like stick somewhere. But it's probably going to be on, like, I don't know if that comes here unless you make some other big changes in that backcourt. But I like what we're seeing from him when he has played.
I love him in the role he's in right now, which is like, hey, somebody's out. Let's bring Sasser into the rotation. Let's let him, knock down shots, score the basketball. I think it's also fair to point out, like, he wasn't Trajan's draft pick 02. And that stuff matters at this point. I'm not saying Trajan doesn't like him. I have no idea, but like that is important. YouTube user brings up Amir Coffey. Delano Banton could be interesting big handlers. Like, yeah, there are guys on the market still that would be interesting additions to the team. Roger Fisher asks, any chance Trajan gets asset to facilitate some big boy trades? I think those big boy trades are coming at the deadline next offseason 02. Would you agree? Or I feel like it's coming in those situations sooner.
I would think the deadline would be the earliest. The example I always bring up is when Indiana, like once they saw that their core was worth building around and that they could actually go for it, they went and got Pascal Siakam. And, I think at the deadline, I think you could get better deals at the deadline than you can get during the regular season at times. And I think it also allows you as a front office, I mean, you've got some big salaries coming up that you've got to pay, which of these guys are we going to lock in? And then from there, which star fits the guys that we lock in, right? And I think I think one has to happen before the other, essentially, is you got to know who you're truly building around because you can't build around everybody. So, I don't know if they're a year away from that Siakam swing. Maybe it's the season after next. I don't know. But I think that's the point you want to get to before you make that type of swing. And to me, the earliest is probably going to be this upcoming trade deadline.
Derek Brown says, question to 02, did Quentin Grimes ever request a trade out of Detroit?
To my knowledge, I'm not sure. Obviously something broke down where he ended up not coming back. He's still a restricted free agent right now, right?
So I've been saying this since that trade 02 is that Quentin Grimes better be asking for way more money than what he should. And listen, I realize restricted free agency, like all the leverage is with the team, but it seems like right now he's asking for more money than what the team wants to give him. I know there's some like future salary cap implications in terms of these situations as well. Like we haven't seen J.I. and J.D. get re-signed, extended either. But yes, I do think it's noteworthy that he has not gotten his contract there in Philly.
Yeah. So, for whatever reason, it didn't work out here, and we'll see if it works out for him in Philly. I think we all like this game, saw the upside with him. Yeah, the tough thing with restricted free agency now is that teams just don't really have money in free agency like they used to have. So honestly, restricted free agents, I think I've kind of gotten screwed by the CBA changes over the years that have encouraged teams, essentially to re-sign their core guys and stay over the cap. I think guys like, Grimes are probably limited to the mid-level. And, if you're a young guy and you're coming off a good season, there was a time where you could probably push for $20 million or more. And, the money's just not really there for that now. So, we'll see how it resolves. But, that kind of plays into Ivy and Duren coming up too. Like restricted free agency, I think it's just a bad place, awkward place for players to be. It's an awkward place for teams to be. The CBA really encourages both sides to sign extensions to kind of avoid those scenarios. So we'll see how it plays out with Grimes and then obviously with Ivy and Duren this summer too.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Kuminga, Quentin Grimes, Josh Giddey, Cam Thomas, none of these guys have signed, any sorts of deals here. And the free agency market is dried up. The cap room is dried up. And so, I mean, quite frankly, they don't have a ton of leverage left outside of playing on their qualifying offer and then becoming unrestricted free agents. Like they could throw that at the team. That's a little bit of a bet on yourself. But you mentioned it there. Camille, our guy, says how much you think JD and JI will get in terms of contract. I mean, I'm still somewhere in the 20s, like low 20s for those guys. I know I'm always a little bit more careful with those type of contracts. I don't know, O2. Again, it came out recently that the salary cap's only projected to jump 7% next offseason instead of 10%. And the understanding is, we said his name multiple times, Keith Smith has said this, that's given a little bit of pause to some of these extension talks these teams are going through. We finally got Paolo's the other day. I think that's the only one. Is that the only one we've got from that draft class? Well, we got Jabari's, I guess.
Jabari. And I was going to say, I've kind of looked at Houston as a model for how teams have kind of threaded the gap, between paying a guy based on the upside, while still keeping it somewhat manageable. I've brought up Jalen Green a few times. They definitely, I think, based on his production up to that point, overpaid him. But the upside to that is that if he does start to deliver on this potential, the deal ends up becoming a bargain. And before it even gets to that point, they were able to trade him in a deal that facilitated, getting them Kevin Durant, which, as far as players who directly addresses their biggest needs, it doesn't get too much better than Kevin Durant. So again, like with Bryce Smith Jr., they just signed him to a 5-year, $122 million extension. That's probably a bit more than what he's earned production-wise so far, but it has the same upside. He's in the 20s pretty much that entire deal. And, if he begins to really deliver on his upside, now it's a bargain and you have him under team control. So I think Ivy and Duran kind of fall in that same range to various extents. And they very well could say, I think I'm good enough to take this into free agency. But, I think what Houston's doing is probably the most sustainable model that, teams are going to begin turning to. Just given somewhere in the middle, a guy still getting a contract worth over $100 million, which used to be Shaq money at one point. So everybody stays pretty happy.
PD Mac says last on Grimes that him and Sixers are not close on contracts. Saw it a few days ago. Roger Fisher says JD and JI get bigger extensions than Stewart, right? I would agree that they get
yeah. I mean, Stewart's at like 15, 16 million.
Yeah, so I would not advise them to take those deals. I think you start to get into the 20 AAV. I think those are interesting, but I'm sure those guys want something that total is 100 million. Camille says, Bryce, it really moved me that even after all these years, you still referred to me as our guy, quote unquote, big bro. Well, of course, man. Like we take care of all of our listeners, but especially ones that have been with us for a minute. Next question here. We'll get through these and then we're going to talk Jurassic World a little bit. Our guy, Matt, what aspect of Clinton's game will you pay most attention to during Summer League? What do you want to see the most?
Honestly, just could he continue? I want to see how he shoots it, but I just want to see if he continues to sustain what he's done in limited time. I want to continue to see him, pass the ball at a high level. I want to see him knock down open threes, and I want to see him do some things defensively as well. So really, just stay on the current course. You don't got to go out there and be what Bryce Smith Jr. was last summer, but just keep showing signs of the positive progression that we've seen thus far. So I'm just looking at what he's shown. They continue to pass the ball, continue to knock down open shots, and knowing where to be on defense. That's
what I was going to say. Knock down shots. That's the most important thing for him to get on the court. And then what does he look like defensively? I feel pretty strongly the guy can pass the basketball for his role. Yeah. I want to see, can you be not an elite shooter, but can you be a big time floor spacer out of the corner, running, maybe you pick and pop, maybe you ghost actions, transition, those type of things. And then can you really defend? Cloudy says, is Cade no longer our best defender at the guard position if Asar doesn't count? I mean, I think the argument here would be Karis LeVert. I would say Karis is going to take those matchups more than Cade is going to be if they're on the court together. So I would say Karis probably takes that mantle from him.
Yeah, I think on average, just as Karis is being asked to do less, he'll probably exert more energy on defense. But I think Cade playing peak defense probably exceeds, Karis's peak defense. Like we've seen Cade take over games defensively. So we'll see how that shakes out. Cade's also been working on conditioning so he could take on more of those responsibilities. So, we could see more of that. And obviously there are guys in the league who can, play on that level too.
What it does is it gives you some optionality, and especially with LeVert, to me, this is the biggest LeVert over Schroeder upgrade. I know you give up some ball handling, but is the defensive versatility that LeVert provides that Schroeder just doesn't as much with his size. Douglas asked, when's the first Summer League game? On Friday. It's afternoon local time in Vegas. I think it would be 5 or something Eastern time.
We have all that stuff on freep.com. You can go on freep.com and we've got all that news.
Yep. Oh, that's okay. This is fair. I guess I was only thinking Cade.
Yeah.
Would it be LeVert or Holland? I would say LeVert's more consistent right now. I hope we see that jump from Ron Holland. Like Ron was still kind of like chaotic as a rookie, figuring stuff out. Ron definitely has the potential to be better than LeVert, though. That's a good call.
Yeah, and he definitely has the want to. Like, I think he absolutely wants to be that guy. You know, and then that's like the most encouraging thing is that he's just raring to get to that level.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you guys this has been his rep since high school. Coming out of Duncanville, the rep about him was the motor, the compete, all of that. One more here, then we have a super chat, then we'll talk movies. Matt says, which of the young guys do you expect to take the biggest leap next season? I'll say Asar.
Yeah, I'll say Asar. I mean, just again, full offseason of work. Like what he did last season, like he had to play himself into shape essentially because he wasn't cleared until November and didn't have the offseason, like didn't have the end of his rookie season. So he's actually able to build momentum now and very curious to see what that looks like. So I'm going to go with Asar as well.
Okay. So one more super chat here. Thank you again so much. We always appreciate these.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Big time.
Will the Pistons look at Holland at the 4 in Summer League? If not, is Bobby a viable option as the backup for the season? Thanks for all the content. So we've talked about this a little bit. We've talked about Asar at the 4. Me and Wes are actually debating this right now through text message. I think Holland, like this is what I always forget. Holland is actually bigger than Asar Thompson. So you would think there is this optionality. Like I don't think we talk about Ron Holland enough playing some minutes at the 4. I mean,
he's 6'8" with like a massive wingspan. Like
athletic. If he's put on a little bit of weight, if Tobias is going to play 30 minutes at the 4, you can probably get 18 minutes from Ron Holland and Asar Thompson every game, right? And then, maybe Bobby only has to play if somebody's out or something like that. So Ron is more intriguing to me at the 4 than Asar because I don't think you give up as much in terms of the perimeter matchups based on how Ron plays defense right now. But what are your thoughts on that? Like just looking at the roster, I don't have the roster pulled up. I'll have to look at the roster and see how many other 4s they have for Summer League.
Yeah. I'll say, the biggest thing keeping Ron from playing the 4 now is, he just turned 20, but just like he had like a 19-year-old frame, like I think as he gets a little bit older and he fills out. Like I think you could compare his measurables, at least initially to a guy like OG Anunoby, and he's added like a lot of muscle and, size over the years. And, I think, if Ron can get to that, if he adds, 10, 15 pounds and, can really body some of those guys, then matchup dependent, obviously, but I do think that could be in the cards for him. Yeah,
it'll be interesting, just when you look at some of the other size and heights on the roster, there could be some 4 there. I just assume we're going to get a ton of Bobby Klintman at the 4 this offseason. So real quick for everybody, I have it pulled up now. So Friday, they play at 6 Eastern, NBA TV. Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Next Tuesday, a week from today, 4:30 Eastern on NBA TV. And then Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, NBA TV. And then obviously, depending on like after that, there's a chance they have they play one more game no matter what. And then potentially another one or whatever it is. I don't always pay super close attention to that. So, all right. That's all the Pistons stuff. That's Summer League. That's the off season. I feel like we've been able to kind of put a bow on a lot of that in terms of finally understanding the mechanisms and where things are in the lay of the land. Jurassic World, O2. Your thoughts?
I liked it. Solid Saturday afternoon flick. Like that's how I would describe it. It's like I have a category of movies that like if you're ever just flipping through the channels, there's always some random movie on FX. Like they like to play the X-Men movies a lot. Like it may be some random comedy, it might be Bad Boys, but like it might be Transformers. Like to me, like the new Jurassic World is like going to be an FX classic. Like you can catch this on a Friday afternoon on TV and be thoroughly entertained. And to me, the Jurassic World movies just got dumber and dumber. Like the third one, Dominion, was terrible. And I don't ask for a lot from these movies, but it was just really bad. And this one wasn't really bad. This one was solidly mid-tier Jurassic Park. Wasn't the best one, wasn't the worst one. I was satisfied with it, but I'm curious to hear how you felt about this one too.
Matthew, real quick from Brazil says, hey, my goats, love from the South. And then also said, hey, I started to produce Pistons content. You guys are the inspiration.
We appreciate that.
This is really cool. Hey, hit me up, Matthew. I got a Substack that's always looking for content creators and helpers over there. I can't pay you because it's free, but if you want somewhere to put some of your stuff, it was fine, Omari. Here's the caveat. I hate going to movie theaters. Like it's a top 5 dislike thing.
Why?
In my life.
Why do you hate going to the movies?
Because I have to sit there for 2 hours in a movie theater with other. I don't Like, I don't want to be around other people when I'm watching a movie. I have to pay $50,000 for my kids to eat too much popcorn and drink too much pop. The littlest one, I have to pay $6 still for him to go. I shouldn't be taking my 6-year-old to the movie. Guys, don't turn me in. And for him just to fall asleep anyway. Yeah, it was fine. I stayed awake. I didn't look at my phone to see how many minutes were left because I do that with movies sometimes. Like, okay, I got to last 30 more minutes here because this has lost my attention. But, do other people not say pop? People probably say soda, huh?
Yeah, we're pop country here in Michigan and apparently down there in Kansas as well.
But yeah, it was okay. And I actually like these movies. Like, I like this, like, obviously Jurassic Park, the original, was something I grew up on and all of that. PD Max says, I only like movie theaters for dates, but I still end up falling asleep now. I will tell you this. I went to the final Harry Potter movie. I'm a Harry Potter junkie. Went back to DC. I watched a midnight showing. Its first night, and the person in front of me fell asleep. And probably the meanest thing I've ever done is I kicked the chair and woke him up because he was snoring and it was pissing me off.
I mean, you can't go to the Harry Potter premiere and fall asleep. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Like, you got to be locked in. Yeah, you got to be locked in.
You know what you're getting into if you go to the midnight showing.
Yeah, I like the movies. Before the pandemic, I was going to the movies a lot. Like, especially when I lived in like Pittsburgh and Memphis, sometimes I just had a random, Tuesday or whatever, and I would just go see a movie. And I was probably seeing like at least one movie a month for like a while. And I got into Movie Pass before they realized how bad of a business model it was. And I was just seeing all these movies for like $10 a month. So that was a nice era. I don't go as much now because there are no movie theaters near me in Detroit. Like, the closest one is like, well, it's not going to sound like it's far for you, but it's far for me. It's like 20 minutes in Ferndale, the Imagine Theater. It's a good theater, but I like driving like 5 to 10 minutes to the theater. I don't like driving 20 minutes, so I'm gonna go.
So this is gonna blow your mind, O2. You know the small town I grew up in, right? You know where I'm from. My little small town actually has a movie theater.
Okay.
But here's what it does. It shows one movie 3 nights a week at one showtime. So you can go to the movie on Friday at 6 o'clock, Saturday at 6 o'clock, or Sunday at 6 o'clock. And that's the only movie it shows. But we do have a movie.
Is that the theater that like y'all go to now?
No. So that's in my original hometown that we don't live there anymore. We went to a little bit of a bigger town that's 20 miles away that is a little bit more like what you're talking. Multiple movies, multiple showtimes, all of that stuff. So anyway, yeah, as Mr. Ray says, better than nothing. So, all right, that's enough movie talk. I'll see you tomorrow or the next day, something like that, out in Vegas. Everybody, thank you for watching, viewing, rating, subscribing, liking, supporting, all of that. We really, really appreciate you. If you are headed to Summer League, either watching live now or you're listening to the podcast, tomorrow or the day after, make sure you say what's up to us while you're out there. We would really appreciate it. We always love interacting and talking with everybody. And you guys don't forget, Omari owes me lunch and he will be paying for it on Friday. So I'm excited for that. We'll see where he decides to pick for us and Laz to go. I'm excited to meet Laz in person. That's the best part of Summer League, is meeting people in person.
That's definitely going to be big time.
Because that's always a little bit different. KDA 1024, great show as always, guys. Mr. Ray, great show, fellas. Enjoy that meal, Bryce, paid for by O2. Shams gives the prayer hands. Appreciate you guys. O2, take it away, my guy.
Yeah, big thanks as always to our audio producer, Robin Chan. Big thanks to our editor-in-chief, Nicole Avery Nichols. And big shout out to Wes, who we hope to have back next week. And we will talk to you all next time in Vegas.